Hello and welcome to Study Time's three-part series on how to study better. In this video we're going to be going through common mistakes and the purpose of studying. So for that I'll take it back to Jordan 3 months ago. So before we get into how to study, we need to actually learn what the purpose is so we know what to actually do in the first place. So when we're studying for an exam environment, which is very different from just memorizing content. We're not just trying to memorize definitions, we're trying to understand and learn concepts to be able to apply them to solve problems. So there are two types of memory retrieval, which is the ability for you to access content from your long-term memory. The first is recognition and the second is recall. So recognition is the much weaker form. That's being able to see content and being able to understand it when it's in front of you, but not being able to actually recall it yourself from your memory. That classic example is if I showed you a 50-cent coin, you'd be able to recognize that the picture of the boat is the 50-cent coin, but if I asked you to draw a 50-cent coin, I reckon most of you would probably suck at it. Recall is the much stronger kind of memory retrieval, and that's been able to confidently and effectively get information from the top of your head and apply it. So that's what we need to be doing in an exam, because that doesn't require any kind of mental cues or hints or whatever. It's also the reason why sometimes we open up the front page of the booklet and we're like, oh damn, I remembered nothing. So let's quickly go through how not to study or the most common mistakes. And me, when I was a young boy, I made all 5 of them. So the first is rote learning, which is pretty much just repeating stuff until you memorize it. This is bad for a few reasons. The first is that it's not really a pretty deep understanding of the content. You know, you're just kind of memorizing definitions or words that aren't your own, which makes it, one, much more difficult to memorize in the first place, much more boring, and also makes it much more difficult to adapt to tests. And that's pretty much what an exam is. So don't just repeat things in your head until you've got someone else's words down, because that's a pretty bad way of studying. So the second mistake is doing comfortable strategies. So there's a pretty observable phenomenon in psychology, which is that we tend to do what we find most comfortable. We get into the habit of doing things we find not that challenging, not that daunting, not that mentally draining. This is a problem when it comes to studying, because passive study is really ineffective at being able to recall knowledge. So passive studying that doesn't require much mental stimulus or energy or purpose or challenge. These are things like rewriting notes, highlighting, reading your textbook 8 times. Active study, on the other hand, is study that actually requires you to think, to solve problems, to recall content without any notes or cues or anything you can recognize. So we need to actually challenge ourselves when we study, and I know that kind of makes it a bit more daunting, a little bit harder, but it also means we can do it quicker and get better results. So the third thing, which I mentioned just before, is rewriting notes. So when we talk to students, a lot of times we ask them, how do you study for exams? And they say, well, I rewrite notes to form like another cheat sheet or whatever. If you're not rewriting in your own words, this is kind of a waste of time. What you're doing is you're transcribing, you're just taking someone else's words and then rewriting them down. A lot of people think that when they actually write with a pen, that kind of reinforces the memory in your brain. This is not that true unless you actually do it in your own words. This is an active form of study, which is be able to explain it and think about how you understand it and then apply it in an exam, which is what you're doing. You're not just rewriting notes. So the fourth thing is rereading and highlighting. So when we read, yes, if you read things 8 times, you might be able to memorize the definition of mitochondria, but that's not going to help you in an exam when it's like solve this problem or write an essay about mitochondria. Same with highlighting, it's very passive. Again, doing things that don't require you to interpret and then apply content is not that effective for your brain to be actually recall it in an exam. So the next thing, something we all struggle with, I did it last night when I was binge watching Queer Eye, procrastinating your study. So procrastination in psychology terms means applied anxiety. It's our brain saying, this thing's not ideal, it's challenging, it's daunting, let's not put ourselves through that. And then you go, that sounds good to me. So how do we actually stop procrastination? Well, all we're going to have to do is increase the productive time we have to work, which then reduces the amount of anxiety we have to this. And how we do that is through spaced learning and shortening our actual study into chunks. We'll get into that next. Well, that's it for this video. Hope you learned something. Stay tuned for the next one, which is actual practical study tips.